Stocks, bonds, ETFs, straight out of downtown Chicago. This is Zacks Market Edge.
Welcome to Zacks Market Edge, the podcast about investing in your life. I'm your host, Tracy Reineck, and this week I'm joined by Zacks stock strategist Andrew Rocco, who is also the editor of the Technology Innovators portfolio here at Zacks. And I'm having him on because of his expertise with these tech stocks. And we wanted to discuss what is going on with NVIDIA. Are you in it? Should you sell it? What is happening? It's about to report earnings once again. When we're recording this, we're about a week out from the earnings report. So if you are listening to this in September of 2024, they have already reported earnings. But we've gotten some news in recent days from the 13F filings, and those are the filings where the big money managers have to submit what they bought and what they sold 45 days after the end of every quarter. And we discovered that several big named investment gurus basically have been selling their NVIDIA positions and sold in the second quarter of 2024. And those included Stanley Druckenmiller and David Tepper, just named two of the big ones. And I kept seeing headlines like they sold it all, but I went and looked and they actually are still in it, but they have sold the vast majority of their positions. Now, also what's left out from the headlines is when they might have bought into those positions. So neither one of them is really known for trading stocks, getting in and out quickly. And neither of those NVIDIA trades was a quick one. So I looked it up, and Druckenmiller bought in the fourth quarter 2022. And he would have bought, we don't know when in that quarter, but I put it at the very last day of that quarter, so December 31st, 2022. And I just put it through current date that we're recording this, August 20th, 2024. And that position would have been up 768%. David Tepper, he was in first quarter 2023. So he was a little bit later, but he sold out most, if not, but not all. And he would be up a couple 100% on that trade, just getting out there. And that's kind of crazy because that was just first quarter of 2023. He was selling out second quarter of 2024 with a multi 100% gain. But Andrew, I did bring you on because you own NVIDIA in your Technology Innovators portfolio, but you only recently bought it. And we have several other managers of our various newsletters who also own it, but they've bought over various time periods too. The oldest is in Blockchain Innovators, and that's David Bartosiak's portfolio. And he bought NVIDIA on September 30th, 2019. That's the oldest that we have. And he now has a gain of 2,840% on that position. So it's kind of crazy, this stock, but I did want to bring you on to talk about, should you be following Druckenmiller and Tepper in the sales area? You yourself also owned NVIDIA last year and sold out of it. Now you're back in it again. So what do you think about these big money managers getting out, not completely out of their position, but basically cashing in?
Yeah, so I actually have one of Druckenmiller's quotes here, and in my eyes, he's one of the best on the street. So I always at least listen to what he's saying. And what his quote from his CNBC interview, where they saw that he got out of the stock via his 13F, he said, "We did cut that and a lot of other positions in late March. I just need a break. A lot of what we recognize has become recognized by the marketplace now." So the way that I interpret what Druckenmiller said right there is not that he's bearish. It's just become kind of the obvious trade in the market. And the way they got to be the obvious trade in the market is really it's the liquid leader in the market. They're the fastest growing company. They're the most innovative company, and they have that liquidity. So guys like Druckenmiller, guys like Tepper can pile into the stock. They don't have to worry about jamming the stock up or getting a bad position. So I think I'm kind of in lockstep with him. I like to say I like to interpret the market and stocks in front of me. I don't like to try and predict too far into the future. So I think kind of the easy part of the move is probably behind us. A lot of these larger companies like Meta and Alphabet, I mean, they've plowed in billions of dollars. And I think eventually what the market's going to look for is, does that investment pay off? Because in order to keep buying these NVIDIA chips, they're going to have to show a profit. And really, we've seen ChatGPT as the major large language model. But we want to see if other applications take off and, of course, lead to profitability.
Yeah, that's a good point. So would your advice be that it depends on, selling it depends on where you bought it then, like it did with Druckenmiller and Tepper, really?
Exactly. Yeah. So I always like to say, know why you're in a stock. You should have a strategy of why you're in a stock, and you should know your time frame. So my time frame, for example, is anywhere from a couple weeks to a couple months. I'm usually not holding anything 4 to 5 years. So what I try to do is I try to have my average cost, and we'll just go to a slide so we can visualize this. I have my average cost. I want to have it below the red line, which is the 50-day moving average that you're seeing on that chart here. And that's kind of my intermediate line in the sand. Now, someone who owns it from 2019, they're up 2,000%. They can even sit through a 50, 60% correction and be fine. So you really have to know ahead of time, because you don't want to sit through that 50, 60% correction if it were to happen and make a knee-jerk reaction. So by knowing your time frame and your investment kind of strategy ahead of time, you're going to stop yourself from those knee-jerk reactions, those emotional decisions in the heat of battle.
Yeah. What about someone who bought when Tepper bought? So when AI busted out in that first quarter of 2023, and you were like, hey, something's going on here, I'm going to dive into this now. And that seems like what Tepper did. And it also seems what Brian Hayes did on the headline trader portfolio, because he bought it on March 9th, 2023, and now he's up 440%. And now we've been in this for a while, and, we are kind of waiting to see how much more growth is there in the near term, at least with NVIDIA's earnings and revenue growth. And my biggest fear, if I was holding this from last year, which I actually don't own it in any of my portfolios, would be that they are ultimately going to have a quarter where it's slowed. Like, it's just not going to be as huge of a beat, or they're not going to raise guidance for the year. Something is going to be not quite as good, even though it's still good. And then I fear a big sell-off on something like that. But should I be getting out if I had dove in right when AI busted out? I got these big over 400% gains. Should I be kind of leery here or not?
Yeah. So at the risk of sounding like a politician, it doesn't have to be yes. It doesn't have to be no. One thing I preach to clients is that you can sell some and keep some. So I'm someone who probably wouldn't get to the 400, 900% gains that Bartosiak has, for example. But a nice way to do it is all or none decisions really put a lot of pressure on you. So what you can do is you can look at a longer term chart. The chart that I have, these are monthly candles. So this is the correction in 2022, and that was a lot more brutal than most people thought. So that just goes to show you how strong that uptrend was. But you can see here I have the Fibonacci's drawn basically from the high of that correction to the low, and then extended out. And it hit really what I look at as one of the most extreme extensions in the long term. So with that said, the stock is not doing anything wrong. Earnings are still great. The stock is the clear leader. Even with those Druckenmiller and Tepper sales, one could argue that it's actually held up well. They said they sold it, made a lot of headlines, and despite that, it's held up well. So one thing you could do is you could always take off a quarter or half of your shares, lock in those gains, and then with a 400% winner, for example, you're playing with casino money. So that's one thing I preach is never think all or none. You can trade around that core position.
Okay. Now, what made you get back into it after you had sold out from your 2023 position, and then earlier this year you were out? Was it on the pullback you decided, hey, this is a good buying opportunity now in the stock?
Yeah, so usually in a leading stock, a liquid leader with high growth and institutional sponsorship like NVIDIA, these pullbacks, especially after a long run to the 50-day moving average, tend to be buyable. So actually, this last one, we caught from May 2023 to early 2024, we caught like 147% gainer. So we had already done well with the stock, and then it pulled back into this 50-day moving average. We actually got it a little below it. Obviously, we had the yen carry trade blow up. The market kind of blew up, but NVIDIA was the leader, so we did give it a little bit more room, and now we have a 10% cushion into earnings. So one thing about earnings that I say is you want to earn your way into earnings. For most people, you don't want to just flip a coin into a report, because even if they beat, sometimes the stock will go down and vice versa. So I like to try and have a 5 to 10% cushion minimum so that if the stock gaps down, I'm not panicking. So as of now, we have a 10% cushion going in, and we'll take it one day at a time. We'll watch kind of what the options are implying for earnings and take it from there.
Okay. What do you think about some of the other, just randomly, some of the other AI stocks? Because this one got all the headlines, obviously, because it's the leader. And so when a Druckenmiller or a Tepper sell out of it, everybody's talking about it. But Buffett has been selling out of Apple now. Do you see this is just profit taking with a lot of these big names? Because they are all up big.
Yeah, I do. I think that if it was a straight line, all of us would be, billionaires, of course. But I am still seeing a lot of the forward estimates in Zacks for companies like ARM, SMCI. They just had we're along the SMCI and the tech innovators, and I own it as well. I've had one really solid pass when it had that crazy move. I didn't catch the whole thing, but I had a good pass, and then the last one we got stopped out. But I think they're still paused to move higher. I think just people are a little bit too short term in their thinking. They have recency bias because people forget how much SMCI, for example, and ARM went up when the AI revolution really kicked in. So a couple months, 6 months, a year of consolidation is not out of the norm. It'll let those valuations become a bit more attractive. And I do still think there's meat on the bone. NVIDIA is probably not my favorite among the AI names any longer. I'm a big fan of like Palantir at these levels. I'm watching ARM. We're in the SMCI. So those are some of the ones that I'm looking at.
Excellent. Any other tips for anyone out there who's wondering if they should sell their NVIDIA? Because it is a hard decision to make, right? You do have the recency bias and things like that, where it's just been on such a run. Even with the recent pullback, you feel like maybe you'll miss out if you do cash in anything.
Yeah, again, I can't give like a blanket answer for that. But again, know why you're in the stock. Are you in it for the fundamentals? If you are, you're going to want to watch, as you said, if they have that slow quarter that will kind of turn the boat. I know they did delay that new chip, and it hasn't really had an effect. I mean, they're light years ahead of anyone. AMD is making a ton of acquisitions to try and catch up. But I do think eventually it gets commoditized and it will slow down. I mean, if you think about the internet in '99, all those stocks took off. If you had a .com in your name, they all took off. There was kind of that 10-year period, and then all the profitability, the Amazons of the world, the profitability kicked in, and then they started to go again. I don't think it will be that extreme, but I do think it'll go in waves. We've had this first wave. I'm not sure when it's going to end. I think we're still within the first wave. Again, I said I don't predict, but at some point we'll have a correction and people will say, okay, where's the profitability? Where are the new applications?
Okay. That's good advice. It's always good to have a plan.
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah, and I did want to just show this chart is very interesting. It just kind of shows how history doesn't always repeat, but it does rhyme. And what you're seeing here is we have what's called an ABC correction. And basically what that means, it's a W formation where that C leg, it undercuts. And I just wanted to point out to people how you can learn to recognize these patterns. They do tend to repeat, even in the same stock, even in the same year. You can see NVIDIA, we have that A down, B up, C down, and then it goes to the gap area and then rips higher. Same thing, we have the A down, B up, C down, gap fill, and then rips higher. So I just thought that was something that I noticed today. It's interesting. And that pattern is actually, with that recent correction we had in the market, that pattern is appearing more and more.
Okay, that's definitely something good to look at. What do you think about NVIDIA like beating and raising again, or what its growth trajectory is like going forward? Because the growth, I've argued, the growth is actually still there.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they earned their PE, I think, is 69 at the moment. So it is a high PE, but the growth is there. I always like to say you can't put the traditional valuation on a company like NVIDIA because you're not going to know the denominator. It's growing so fast. And again, we're seeing hockey stick like growth here into 2026, it looks like. So one thing I would watch for is just the price action to deteriorate. Often, unfortunately, it's not like the earnings go and then the stock goes down. Oftentimes, the price will start to crack before then. So if you start to see the price living below that 50-day moving average and on a longer term time frame, that the 200-day moving average, that could mean that insiders and smart investors are pricing in that slowdown ahead of time. But yeah, the market, as I always say, tends to discount the future.
Yeah. So this the sales chart that you have up there, that is showing basically a doubling of the sales again by 2025, it looks like. That's pretty incredible because 2023, we were only just a little bit over 20 billion, it looks like. And then obviously this year, it's looking around 60 billion. And then almost 120 is expected for 2025. And that, for a company of this size, that's just like, we'll never see something like this again. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying. It's unprecedented. So that's why I kind of do lean towards giving the stock, and that's why we're still long the benefit of the doubt, because it's not like it's pets.com and they came public, it went up 500% and it has no earnings. They do have those incredible earnings. The question is if it slows down, it has moved such a long way. If it slows down, we have to see how the stock reacts. So it's kind of, I'm kind of in wait and see mode. As I said, I do think there's going to be more meat on the bone in other areas. And we've yet to see really the IPO market heat up as far as AI goes outside of ARM Holdings, which we don't own it right now. I'm looking to get back into it, but ARM Holdings is one I'm bullish on for kind of their mobile assets. And then there's even some smaller ones, which is AEYE. So they're kind of an AI name. They're one of the few small ones that has been growing pretty quickly. And the stock has actually been going up. It didn't just have that hype phase and then crash down. NVIDIA is a partner with them. So that's an interesting one. Yeah.
That's Audio Eye you're talking about?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. We haven't really seen the ecosystem expand that much yet, but that could still obviously be coming down the pike. And that's what all of us investors are going to want to be looking at, like who is going to be, taking advantage of this outside of the NVIDIAs and Supermicros. There's going to be somebody's going to be.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
pretty much everyone agrees that ChatGPT is kind of the leader right now. So a lot of people have Rails on top of ChatGPT that they're using. So the key is are they actually adding value or not? A lot of them just kind of using ChatGPT, repackaging it. The ones who do it successfully, those will be the next big winners. And those companies are going to be a lot smaller than NVIDIA. So there will be some asymmetric bets, in my opinion, coming up in the next few years.
Yeah. One other question about NVIDIA. Do you ever worry about the execution ability of NVIDIA? So far, they've been able to see this explosion in sales and handle the orders, basically. But do you ever worry like they might not be able to? Because, I mean, yes, they're a huge company, but growing your sales, doubling it in a year puts a lot of stress on any organization. Any company would be stressed with that. It kind of reminds me of when Oprah had her favorite things for the holidays, and she used to feature like a lot of small companies that were making some kind of good, gift idea. And then she would feature them on her show or in her magazine. And then the sales would explode like you would. And the people who were featured were always like, we're going to be featured by Oprah. Yeah. But then they couldn't, like the phones were like ringing out the hook or the internet orders were coming in and they were overwhelmed by the demand. And then they could not execute. Like they couldn't do it. So do you ever worry with NVIDIA? Like if this sales trajectory actually comes to be that they cannot actually execute something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to trust anyone, it's Jensen Wong. Obviously, he's the best manager out there, but it is a possibility. I mean, he's not superhuman, so it is a possibility with the amount of demand. We haven't seen that yet. We did see it in SMCI. You'll remember they did partner. Kind of NVIDIA was helping them out to pump production because there are other parts needed for these data centers. So it is something to watch moving forward. But again, really that big question is, does the spending slow down for these companies? Because at some point, the investors are going to say, hey, are you making money with this? Or are we just kind of burning money here on these AI dreams? We want to see profitability come through.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, this was a good discussion. I think people have a better understanding now of maybe what direction they might want to take, depending on when they bought, what their goals are, all of that good stuff. And we did mention quite a few number of companies that, are kind of in this space that you are watching or like. And so some of those, I'll just give those tickers out. Palantir is PLTR, obviously NVIDIA, NVDA. Supermicro, we mentioned them a couple times. SMCI is the ticker there. ARM Holdings is ARM. And then you did mention AudioEye as one of the smaller kind of AI plays. A is an Adam, EYE is the ticker on that one. And someone at Zacks, Kevin Cook, actually owns the two-time NVIDIA ticker, and that one is N as in Nancy, VDL, NVDL, and be careful on those double ones.
I'm jealous on that
because they are meant to, those are meant to be traded and not really held long term. So keep that in mind if you're looking at any of those, two-timers stocks. So as always, be sure to subscribe to get the Market Edge. You can get us here on YouTube. Just go to Zacks.com/YouTube. And we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on Amazon Music, but be sure to get us somewhere. And I'll see you again next week with some more stocks.